You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
You found your person. Now let the Knot help you with everything else. The Knot connects you to the wedding inspo, vendors, venues, and planning tools you need to make your day totally you. Having helped plan 25 million weddings, we've got your back when it comes to every little detail like RSVPs, budgets, and more. Because your wedding comes to life with the connections that matter the most. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Podcast Network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I am Hodey Johns.
I'm Aaron V.
And I'm Chris Gault.
And this is Enemy of My Enemy. We're trying a pilot episode right now. If we get a lot of positive fan interaction, we will keep up this show. If not, then we're going to have fun for one episode, and I'm very grateful for that. So this is the We Are Libertarians Network, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is kind of a left, right, center. I am representing the center. Aaron's going to represent the left libertarians, and Chris Gault is going to represent the right libertarians. And we're just looking for a discussion as well as debate, so everybody can know what that sounds like. So that's what we're all about. We're going to jump right in with our pilot topic, which is the impeachment of Donald Trump, and should he have been impeached, and kind of our thoughts about that whole thing. So on January 6th, Donald Trump, as well as some friends and family, got up to talk about how the election was stolen, made a few speeches, kind of had a rally together. It was official. It wasn't spur of the moment. They all got together. We're like, hey, let's talk. They said their piece. After they said their piece, these same people who were at this protest. In fact, if you listen to the We're Libertarians regular episodes, you'll actually hear a couple people who were at the protest and then went over to kind of become become part of the riot, where they invaded the Capitol building. There was one police officer who was murdered, as well as 4 rioters died as a result, and Trump was then he was impeached again. Impeachment doesn't necessarily mean you're kicked out of office. He was impeached again, and but they did not vote to kick him out of office. Obviously, he wasn't president at the time this vote came around, but he can no longer hold office if they were to have impeached gone through with the motion. It did not succeed. There were, I believe, 10 Republicans that joined with a unified Democratic front to impeach him. So he can still run for office in 2024, for better or for worse. What do you think? I'm going to start with Aaron. What do you think about the impeachment? What are some of your thoughts?
So where it all falls for me, I clearly he was guilty of spreading disinformation. Clearly there was several instances that you could point to that are fairly obvious that he was pointing his supporters in a way towards hatred, towards violence, towards that kind of thought process. I think really like where it comes down to is, what are the limitations on your free speech? What are the limitations of the First Amendment? And like, we have plenty of laws that you can point to. For example, Rudy Giuliani is being sued by the company that runs the voting machines for libel because he lied and potentially cost them a lot of money. And I think it's much the same thing that we're seeing from Donald Trump and the rest of the Republicans on that side. And for people like Ted Cruz, and there were other examples to say that they already know how they're going to vote before they've seen any of the information, before they've even sat down. For a juror to say they already know how they're going to vote before they've seen any information on the trial, I think is inexcusable. I think it's disgusting. And that's not how the country is supposed to run.
All right, Chris, what are some of your thoughts on impeachment?
Yeah, I can see that as being pretty much the main basis for it would be the limitations on freedom of speech. Obviously, the limitations on freedom of speech would be when harm's being done, when it results in violence, and it's very easy to argue that the events of the Capitol did result in violence, and it started with freedom of speech, or someone's speech that started those violent acts. So. Although I do think that the events the media did blow them a little out of proportion, I do think that there was violence that led to that. So the first impeachment, political sham. The second impeachment, because of that violent act, because of the result of what happened, yeah, it was impeachable. I actually think we should impeach more people. I think that politicians all of the time do things that that it doesn't even have to be freedom of speech, things that are against the interests of the people. And I think that Congress should impeach the presidents more often and other officials more often. I think it should be used a lot more. And then the Senate's still there as a check to make sure they're not removed from office for a political move to impeach someone, right? That's why he wasn't removed the first time. So that's what I think. I think we need more impeachment. I don't think any of them work for our interests, so let's impeach them all. What do you think, Hodey?
So my thoughts probably would have been almost exactly the opposite of yours. I probably would not have impeached him for inciting a riot, and would have impeached him the first time for, just not complete non-cooperation with that investigation. For me, I think here's what it is. Inciting a riot is reprehensible, but I would rather see a social consequence rather than a legal consequence, or because I think the problem with inciting a riot, first of all, the standard is actually crazy high. The Supreme Court, everything fell into the First Amendment. It was challenged, went all the way to Supreme Court in 1969 in a case called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And it was a KKK guy who said some awful things. And I know this is a surprise that the KKK would say awful things, but said some awful things. Some people acted in turn, and they established a policy. They established that no, he can't be tried for inciting a riot. He actually has to specifically tell somebody to do violence and plan on the violence. And so that actually has been challenged twice in the Supreme Court since then. Both the times the Brandenburg decision has been upheld. Now, an impeachment is not a legal process. I'm sure somebody out there is screaming at me
That's
right
what
now.
I was, yeah.
Right. It's not a legal process. Basically, you can say like for pretty much being a jerk or for pretty much inciting a riot, right? But I think for me, it is kind of a technical thing. I think for me, I would have impeached Donald Trump for maybe like 1,000 different things. I don't like the precedent of saying what's the limit of free speech. I do agree that there is some amount of culpability when you say like, hey, go kill somebody, and they kill somebody. Otherwise, like what, Hitler is completely innocent, right? Like, because, hey, you just told other people to kill people. He's not doing it himself. Obviously, there is some kind of limit there. But as far as spreading, should you be able to lie? Well, I'm having trouble thinking of any media organization that would exist without being able to lie. And I'm not even saying, I'm not trying to be like, every media lies and they're all full of lies. But I mean, on some occasion, they picked up a story that wasn't true.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And been like, okay, so what? And we hurt this person. Do we have to go out of business? Or we lose millions of dollars? Is this, what should be the punishment there? There was one specific point. I think if you were to charge anybody with inciting a riot, there was one point that Donald Trump Jr. was talking specifically about the BLM and the violence there, and then actually said, and this is Donald Trump Jr., but said, we need to fight like they do, right after talking about that violence. And kind of it's like, okay. And that's when you started to hear the chants turn into like, let's kill Mike Pence. And it was like, all right, you probably should have gathered that this was turning into a violent event, you know, and at some point you do need to use a little common sense, and you can't be like, well, we told them to be peaceful. You didn't. You actually specifically told them, we got to start fighting like the Democrats do. That is a quote, when in reference to like the BLM rioting. And I'm aware not all the BLM was riots. I think a lot of people like to boil it down to that, but that he had just made the inference about the violent parts of that, and then said, we got to fight like that too. And that's when I kind of went, oh, I think that's maybe why they got so angry and where they got the idea from. But I mean, those are my 2 cents on it. I think it was terrible. I think it was reprehensible. Obviously, anytime you're spreading lies, and if those lies result in violence, even if I don't think you should be impeached, still not good.
Absolutely. The second impeachment for me, I mean, he was already out of office. So, I mean, the first impeachment, however, tell me a little bit more about what you were saying about that, that you were, that he was, what did you say? Getting in the way of the investigation? Yeah,
like straight up telling people not to cooperate. And I think for me, this is not how, like for me as a libertarian that wants transparency, because I think that established for me, I can't imagine Joe Biden doing something now that's awful that we'd be able to convict him on, just because it's as simple as just being like, oh, hey, not today. So, there was a report about like when Tom Brady did the Deflategate thing, and they never were able to find it out from him, but they found all the text messages, and then he destroyed his cell phone like right in front of him. And they're like, oh, hey, Tom, you met with me. And he's like, oh, later, guys, I'll meet with you. And at some point you're kind of like, okay, like this is getting to the point where it's like a normal person doesn't throw their cell phone in a fireplace, you know, and you kind of
you don't expect him to self-incriminate himself if he knows there's evidence on there that convicts him, do you?
Right.
Well, you know, and you don't expect that from Tom Brady or the president, do you?
There's a difference between not incriminating yourself and hindering an investigation.
Correct. And this for me, that's a great point. And this for me fell into like the hindering an investigation. As a libertarian, I think anything that opens the doors to just say like, hey, come on in, videotapes everywhere, make every politician wear a GoPro at all times, you know, like, I mean, that's just, and so as soon as you're like, oh, I got rid of those documents, or I told that person not to talk to that person, maybe you legally can, but you're not being cool. And like we talked about with impeachment, was it cool? No, it really wasn't, you know? And like, for me, when you're hindering the investigation like that, get them out of there. I will say, not to completely counter your point, Chris, like we should impeach more politicians. Like if the standard is just not liking them, I'm okay with establishing that precedent. You know, I wouldn't be brokenhearted even if Trump were convicted the second time, because then they say, well, what now pretty much we convict every president we don't like. And I'm like, oh yeah. Impeach every president. As soon as they're being fishy. And
then that way the Senate votes on it. We can remove them all. Like, let's replace them. I mean, obviously going down the leadership ladder isn't always a great thing, but it is. I mean, then you're talking about smaller terms for each president, because you can split that one term up into 3 different presidents. Let's do it. Yeah. That's our dream. That's the dream, right?
Right. I mean,
with the impeachments.
Right. I hate to celebrate getting Trump out of office and putting Pence in there, but then, like you said, hopefully then it would be only a matter of time before we cycled all the way through. You know, I think this is probably the natural libertarian standpoint, is we want it to be so, if the office must exist, that you have to be so pure that nobody aside from like a total saint would even think about running for office, you know? And
if you're going to hold the highest office in the land, there should be a crazy high amount of accountability. You can't be on a nuclear submarine without passing crazy amounts of tests, and you are held to the highest standard in the land, period. And I don't think you should have the button for the nuclear weapons without being held to a higher standard than the rest of the country. And I think that's kind of what the impeachment is about. It wasn't about putting the man in jail, because the criminal lawsuits have already been, like, the precedent's already there for that. That wasn't the idea.
Right.
It was, what he did was against the country's interests. And what he did was hurt the people. And we can't let presidents do that.
So let me ask you then, turn it back at you, Aaron. Where do you then draw the line? Because what is your line, I guess? Because for me, when we say, and as libertarians, we kind of all believe in the NAP, right? The non-aggression principle. You don't hurt anybody, unless it's defensive violence or whatever. You don't hurt anybody. It's not hurting you, right? But like we're talking about words, you can hurt somebody with your words. Well, then all of a sudden, if I call somebody an idiot and they go kill themselves, have I violated the NAP?
Well, I think that where you draw the line is, like, right along the lines of the non-aggression principle is have I hurt you physically? Have I stolen from you, or have I defrauded you? And I think that's part of where lying comes in, is I'm defrauding you of your money because I'm leading others to believe a certain circumstance that's not the case, and it's costing you your money. So it's hard for me to say that we should litigate woke culture. Like, you can't make it law that you can't say this word or that word because it hurts someone's feelings. I do agree with it being law that you can't say those words and then beat them to death, because then that becomes a hate crime. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if you're beating somebody to death, I mean, whether you call it a hate crime or not, that's already pretty bad, right?
or it doesn't have to be
murder is murder.
It could be defrauding them, and you've slandered this man's name.
Sure.
And you're talking about his personal life. Like, is that a hate crime?
Yeah, slander is hard. It is. It's just because I think the thing is, theoretically, I have said some bad things about certain news outlets, and they could be like, "That's slander, sir. You've cost us 15 listeners that listen that stopped listening because of you." You know what I mean? It's like. Right. And that's hard. I mean, and not that I try to make a habit going about lying about, media outlets or news organizations, but I think this does boil down to the individual. And that's why I think it's hard for me to draw a line. I don't necessarily have the answer, which is probably why I asked you instead of myself. But
right, which is why I would say that I don't argue for litigating woke culture. Yeah. I don't think that's the right answer. Like, sure. As Chris would say, the antidote for bad speech isn't censorship, it's more speech.
You're gonna say my lines for me?
I was gonna turn to you next, Chris, but Aaron already got
because it. we live in a marketplace of ideas, and that's why we shouldn't be afraid of lies and bad ideas, because we have more information now than we've ever had in history. Right now, at our fingertips on the internet, you can find out if something's true or not just by researching it. And if you can't, well, then you get to make an informed decision on what your opinion of that is, and based off the facts that you have. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's why I don't believe in any sort of regulation of free speech, because even if it's a lie, even if it's defrauding you, it's a mistake you make, and it's a choice you make to do it. No one that can defraud you can force you to make a decision. You made the decision, and because you made that bad decision, you will go spread that information to other people, so then they don't make that same decision. And that marketplace of ideas, that idea will flood into the marketplace and be absorbed by other people, so they don't do the same thing you did, and it'll naturally defeat the enemy.
Would you say then that it should not be illegal to hire a hitman?
It should not be illegal to hire a hitman. Yeah, I mean, No, I would say that should be illegal.
Okay. But I mean, let's say I just had a phone conversation. It was their decision to kill somebody. I just asked them to do it.
Well, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good point.
I just convinced everybody that you're
murder. I mean, you're complicit in the murder. So if the murder happens, then you're still guilty. If the murder doesn't happen, I guess not. But
so okay, so it sounds like we're developing a standard here. Then, so the standard is probably to you that if a bad thing happens because of what you said, then it's not protected. Whereas if if nothing bad happens.
Right. And that's what I said about the second impeachment. That's where nothing he did at the speech or anything that happened was really that bad. Nothing crossed the line for me in what he said. It was the result of what he said that led to violence. It might not be him that did it, but what he said led to someone else that then did it. So that's where I could see a line crossed there, but that's where I also said it was after he already left office, and you're not going to be able to throw him out of office anyway. So what if you wanted him impeached the first time, you would have wanted him thrown out of office then, and then kept from running again, right? So because of the intrusion in the election or in the investigation, so. I'm assuming you wanted the same thing for Hillary Clinton when she destroyed all her servers. That you wanted her barred from running for office ever again.
Aaron's nodding his head for those those not on video. Okay, yes.
Yes, wow. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I knew you agreed with him, Aaron, so I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah, if you hurt the American people knowingly and hinder the investigation. Yeah, you should.
Well, because see, my argument earlier was that she shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't expect them to self-incriminate. So the evidence there. So you're still saying that she should not be allowed to run for office. Interesting.
Yes, she should not. She should not be allowed to run for office. She should have if that's the standard we're going to hold, then yeah, absolutely. If you hinder an investigation knowingly. You know you did something wrong. There's a difference between keeping your mouth shut and hiding things. I think those are two completely different things. Like if you are actively seeking to obfuscate the truth, that's not the same thing as just keeping your mouth shut.
Is it when a police officer is at your door? Is that the same principle there? You're not hiding something illegal behind the door that you keep your mouth shut about? Would that not break that same rule?
I think you're like combining the two things I said.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm all for keeping your mouth shut. I guess I see what you're saying, because you're saying like we should have the right to hide things.
Yeah,
the police don't deserve to know about.
Yeah.
Right.
So by your
and destroy it, and we should be able to destroy it, flush it down the toilet, right? Like
that, I not necessarily agree with. I agree. You should have the right to not talk to the cop. You should have the right to not answer your door. But I don't think once you're caught, I don't think you should be able to go and destroy all the evidence of what you did. Well, you knew you were wrong, and you knew you were breaking the law.
And I think part of it is the position that they're in as well. Like for me specifically, and I think we've all at some point indicated when you're in a position of authority, things change. When you say I can control a lot of people's lives, when I have the legal ability to send, I mean, we've had presidents that threw journalists in jail. You know what I mean? That they didn't like. And, I mean, at the point, we established, in the last decade that you can, as long as you don't call it war and you call it kinetic military action, you can blow up a couple 100,000 people, and have your hands washed of it and not have to say anything. Obviously that gives you a level of danger. So, it stands to reason that if somebody, especially if they've monopolized that force, because I'm not allowed to do that with a drone, then there is a special privilege that they have, which needs a special, I think, kind of responsibility or consequence. I think that's probably why we have things like impeachment, whereas like you can't impeach your, the manager from Denny's for giving you bad service, but we can impeach, the president for, lying.
They represent people. They're elected,
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Certain amount of damage and power, I think. Is there a double standard? Let's open up this can of worms because I think this will be fun. Do you think there is a double standard between Republicans and Democrats in regards to impeachment?
Aaron, you can go first.
Yes. I believe so. Yeah, I do believe so. I mean, when Bill Clinton was being impeached, he was being impeached over a private sexual act and abuse of power that came along with that, right? And I don't remember, I was pretty young then, but I don't remember too many of the Democrats fighting too hard going into it saying, nah, he's innocent. We don't need to see any of the evidence. He's innocent. That's how the vote's going to go because they don't have the votes to pull it that way. So,
I see what you're saying. Because that's the way it went this time.
Right. The Republicans didn't need to see any evidence on the trial they're about to be a juror on, and they've already made up their minds. And so I see the left leaning across the aisle when something goes wrong and holding their people accountable. But I don't see the right doing the same thing.
All right, Chris, what do you think?
Well, I think if there was any difference, there ain't going to be any more. Here going forward, it's going to be a lot different. And I hope that we impeach every single president from here on out. At least hold the vote and see what happens, why not? Because you don't have to present any evidence now. You don't have to have any kind of formal thing. It's just it's whatever the speaker wants to do. So if the speaker wants to hold the vote, let's hold it. And I support impeaching more officials.
Now, as far as the Clinton thing goes, I definitely was for that impeachment. Now, very specifically, did he lie under oath? Now, not just saying if you tell a lie when you're president, your presidential oath. Did you lie under oath? He absolutely lied. It was literally a sworn testimony he was giving. And he was like, nah, I've never seen her, never met her. You know what I mean? And it's funny. It actually wasn't. It was related to, of course, the Watergate, not Watergate. His other scandal. I'm an idiot. The first one. The one where he laundered money through the apartments or whatever. Anyway, I don't know why I can't think of this. I will look that up on the next time one of you guys are talking. But, it was related to that. They had this kind of sworn testimony because part of the money was going to pay off women that he had wanted to not speak up about it. And the name came up. They weren't trying to get him. And then it came up later. They found this, this oath. And they're like, oh, he did lie under oath. And said he didn't know somebody that he was being with. So the problem is that I think for me, I could see a bit of a double standard with the Republicans and Democrats, but I might see it the opposite way a little bit, because inciting a riot by the legal definition, he probably did not do. Like if it went to court, Trump did not incite a riot, right? Whereas if it went to court, Clinton absolutely lied under oath. Like that is 100% what he did. So when we say no, now I get what you're saying, Aaron. Like I agree that like you should see evidence, right? You should hear what it is. On the other hand, I think and the Kenneth Starr investigation was nutty. I mean, it got to the point where he's like paying off people and trying to. It's funny because like all he needed to do was click. Here's the one video of him lying under oath. Unclick. It's done. What? You pointing?
He's about to knock over your poster.
Oh, the cat. Oh, it sure is. Look at that. First off, cat's going here. For me, I think that you should have to see the evidence. However, I do think the evidence that was being presented was a lot of victim stories about what happened to people at the Capitol. Like those were the witnesses. Whereas I think when you're inciting a riot, it's not necessarily about the damage. It's if you incited a riot, And so for me, I think it would have meant a lot more to me if I would have felt a little like it was less hypocritical if the witnesses that they called forward, because Kenneth Starr at least called witnesses that had to do with the investigation, right? He told Clinton told his secretary to lie when the investigators asked, Monica Lewinsky was a pretty predominant role in that, right? When you call her forward, these are witnesses that are actually core to your investigation. Whereas I think this was meant to create, and I'm not trying to diminish the sob story, but these witnesses were more to make you emotional and say like, boy, the nature of these riots was really bad, as opposed to, did Donald Trump incite a riot? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I will agree that there were several of the witnesses that was their role, was to create that sob story and show get the people on their side. We almost died. We almost died. We have to do something about this.
I hate to call it a sob story because they almost died.
Yeah, we almost died.
Right.
So, but there were for sure at least a few that made at least half decent arguments, in my opinion, going through, one tweet at a time and just bringing up the facts. He said this on this date and this on this date and this on this date. And it's not just what he said in this one speech. This has been a trend from the day he announced that he was running for president, telling people in the crowd, "Oh, get that guy out of here. You punch that guy in the face, I'll pay your legal fees."
That's hiring a hitman, right?
that is by definition inciting violence.
Nobody did it, right? So no. By our standard, I guess he's okay-ish. But I mean, it is a messed up thing to say. I don't think. I think when you open up Donald Trump's Twitter, so there's this organization that keeps track of all the lies that presidents have said. And I remember, because I used them a lot, I kind of drifted from Republican to left to kind of back to center. But, back when they were really hawking what Obama was saying, they're like, oh, this is unprecedented. He's told 4 times as many lies as any other president in American history. It's absolutely absurd. And Donald Trump in like 2 years had eclipsed what Obama had took him 8 years to lie about, on Twitter alone. Like, you could just be like, at some point they're like, I don't know if we can even count this. Like, it's just a flip book. Like, we're just, this is a very thick amount of disinformation that you're spreading here. And unfortunately, I think we see the effects with, we can probably back off with impeachment, but just talk about the effects of these lies for a second. I mean, you look at groups like QAnon and just how detached from reality they were, because they assumed that what they saw on Donald Trump's Twitter and these people's Twitters was reality. And it's
You've got senators talking about Jewish space lasers now.
Yep.
Like, what is that?
Where does it end?
Right. So I agree that we should have free speech, but that's part of what comes along with it, is you get the crazies that I don't know how in the world they get power. Like, how does someone that really believes that get to the point that they're governing people?
Because he was anti-establishment, so the power structure he was going against hadn't listened to their own people for decades, and the people were fed up with it, and they were willing to accept a new power structure, even if that meant making a deal with the devil, as some would say, because it was better than what we had been stuck in. At least that's the idea, and I think that's the sentiment that was the turning point that elected Trump.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
I was mostly specifically talking about how
I know.
I can't remember that lady's name. She's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
What, Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yes, that's the one.
Oh yeah.
I'm happy to at least remember something. But yeah, the it is surprising to me that I think for me, here's the thing: when they talk about like how do these people get elected, first of all, try to get elected is something that is not Republican or Democrat, and you'll probably see why these people get elected. I mean, there is no, if you've ever worked on a campaign, I'm not even saying libertarian campaign, make an independent run at it, make a Green Party run at it. It is awful. I mean, and I can tell you from having been a campaign volunteer for a long time, if you put a candidate up, I mean, they have judges that will approve all their signatures without ever collecting their signatures. I mean, technically they need X amount of signatures to be on the ballot in some state. And they have a judge that'll say, I'm not even going to check. If you have them and you have 3 times the amount of signatures, they're going to call every single phone number that you've collected. They're going to look at every single address that you have down. If the person has moved, even if they still moved inside of the same state, they're going to throw out your signatures. I mean,
duplicates.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous thing. I mean, so I actually worked for the Republican Party for a little bit. I volunteered, I guess I should say. And I remember fighting with the RNC because we had these Tea Party candidates and they wanted their establishment candidates. And they started doing the same thing they were even Republicans, but, they were counter to the current Republican Party. And the RNC would just squish them down. I think, and here, let me put myself back in the center. The DNC even said like a little while ago, like we'd rather lose with Biden than win with Bernie or something like that. And it's like, oh, well, there they are, folks.
That just proves that they're the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
They're private party functions. You can't blame them if they're rigged, and they're going to pit up whoever they want. And people need to learn that a true people's candidate will never win in either of those parties.
Yeah, I mean, it's controversial if they can even win in the political climate that we have at all. I mean, it's when you look at how serious they take when a libertarian becomes serious, and that's all of a sudden when they turn on the machine, when they're like, all right, well, even if they've managed to pass the signature, then it's going to be something else. It's funny. We're talking about this. Our premier Ruff, Kim Ruff, was running for Arizona State mining inspector, gathered a ton of steam, looked to be like ahead in the polls, was starting to outpace even like the Republicans and Democrats as far as money. And the GOP, governor signs a thing saying, nope, you need to have 4 to 8 years of experience working under in this political climate for you to be able to run. I mean, it's just they'll do it as soon as you become a serious threat, and it's heartbreaking. If anything, it at least I'm glad she still did it, because at least we have this example to say, like, look, this is what we're dealing with. It's not, because it's easy to just say like, oh, what, you can't get the signatures, you're not popular enough, maybe you should try to be more likable. Well, when we finally put somebody up who is more likable, squish back down.
Additional rules against us make it harder to run candidates. They don't even add a single extra reward for doing any of those things either. It's the exact status quo with more rules. It's not, hey, here's some more rules, but here's additional status, and here's additional, you can have primaries now or something, like throw us a bone. There's no reward at all. They just raise the difficulty level. They said, oh, you beat it on level 1. Well, let's try level 2. And then we're going to beat it on level 2, and they're going to say, all right, well, let's try level 3. They just can keep arbitrarily raising the rules because they have power. They have a monopoly over the construction of the way it's set up. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And that's the first thing we need to fix.
Yeah.
So we can take our government back.
If only they had, rioted the Capitol over something that was worth a damn, not just keeping Cheeto Man in office.
Right. I think, and I saw this as a lot of libertarians were defending these rioters, right? And this is kind of where I draw the line, is because I say, first of all, I am a pacifist just as a person. I understand that standard might not apply to everybody. Even when I'm being aggressed against, I believe it's a tactic. We can maybe talk about that on a later episode. But even if you are okay with the violence, and I totally understand sometimes you need, you know what I mean? You got to use some defensive violence, and the people doing the aggression are in the Capitol building, right? I understand that. But yeah, if it's because my guy got elected and your guy didn't,
it's abhorrent.
Yeah, you lost me.
Yeah,
and you always. I wish that the hybrid partisanships would put themselves in each other's shoes, because you would not want that if you're a Republican and a Democrat was doing the same thing. You would not want the roles to be reversed. So why are you doing this? You don't want to make this a thing. Like, right. Why don't set this precedent? It was hideous. I couldn't. I mean, I watched it on CNN just so I could hear the worst narrative possible, and I did. I mean, it was abhorrent. and disgusting. But I mean, I don't directly blame Trump for that. That's where the difference is. I think I don't directly blame Trump for that. I blame society right now, and the divide that we've created with each other. And it's just even if you know something is 100% like, someone on the internet today was like, oh, in Indiana you can carry a handgun, open carry, without a license, without a permit. And they said you only need a permit for concealed carry. And that's true in the case of long guns. But with a handgun, you have to have a permit either way. You have to have a permit in Indiana to carry a handgun. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. It's a fact. But even being told that, it was like they were so defensive, and they made a technicality where, well, not if it's in your car in a box. Like, but yeah, that's not what you said. Like, it's just like people are so afraid to just admit that they made a mistake or that they were misinformed or wrong. And it's dangerous because there's so many ideas out there and so much different thought that you can consume and think about and discover and challenge yourself and challenge other people with. To lock yourself into one mentality and one idea and defend it even to the point where you're, lying to yourself is very common nowadays, especially on the internet. I see it all the time. And even with things that don't matter, that aren't even political, it's bleeding into other things. And then you see people in real life treat each other like that every once in a while. Now you see like, wow, that looked like a Facebook argument. Like they were just being way too rude to each other,
Yeah.
But because I feel like it wasn't a normal 10 years ago to do that in public, but now because of Facebook and social media, that it's just like bleeding over into other areas of our lives. I don't know how I got off on that ramble. Sorry. I don't even know where I started, but that's how I feel about it.
We're used to putting people in like the worst possible box. You know what I mean? Like as soon as you say, well, maybe Donald Trump shouldn't have been impeached, you're a simp, you're an alt-righter, you know what I mean? You're whatever. And then as soon as you say he should have, you're some bleeding hearts. What I got? Soylent, I think is what I got called or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Just and we're so eager to put these people in these boxes, like not every right winger is QAnon. Not every left winger is, a Portland rioter. Like you just, there's plenty of, BLM people that didn't destroy buildings and plenty of Antifa people that don't, break into people's houses. And there's plenty of MAGA hat people that aren't burning crosses in yards. Like I think we're used to putting people in their worst, but, do you guys think that individualism is like a lost idea? I don't see anyone pretty much ever referring, even in the media or anything. It's always everything's referred to in a group sense, a they, and it's always a they and versus another they, and where you need to self-identify which part you're in, and or even multiple versions. It can be 3 or 4, but there's no individuals. It's never a person did this or a person did that. It's an alt-rightist did this, so that way it has a label. Like, was the mass shooting done by a right winger or a left winger? That's the first thing everyone wants to know. Like, so who can we blame? Like who can we hate about it? And who like? Do you guys notice that, or do you think that individualism's like dead? Because I feel like people don't think that way anymore.
I feel like that's by design, because like treating people as individuals doesn't serve the duopoly's purposes. They want us to hate each other. They want us to fight each other. They want to put us in groups because that's what serves their purpose. So on what Hodey was saying, there's a quote that I'm sure it's from somebody else, but my dad has said it to me a bunch of times, is that we judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their actions. And I think that is a lot of what happens, not just individually, but as a party, as a nation. Like we look at Black Lives Matter riots or protests, whatever you want to call it, and we judge the entirety of it based on a few actions, not the intention that the entirety of the group was trying to get across. And it basically negates what they were trying to accomplish based on a few people's poor actions and poor choices.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to address an idea when you're able to pin the entire ideology on a reprehensible individual, and it does not help. I think part of the problem the reason we have the problem that Chris has identified here, the reason we have that problem is because sometimes we do catch ourselves being defensive about it. How many times do you see libertarians like try to stand up for like Stefan Molyneux or like Richard Spencer, or Chris Cantwell? I mean, these are people that are like literally like Nazis are cool and like literally like, white people are smarter than black people. Oh, I'm just asking questions. I'm not racist. I'm just saying, and you're like, dude, like that is so anti-individualist. Like I can't like get off of this train. You know what I mean? I think one of the best things that happened to the Libertarian Party was when like Cantwell went on, it was like Fox or something. It was like the Libertarian Party was too mean to me. And we're like, I'm like, good, like you're not a person that deserves, And so like, I think the thing is we get defensive. You looked at, I think, so let me use a right wing and a left wing example. You look at what happened with like BLM, and the silence was deafening when they would destroy someone's store or like beat somebody up. And it's like, okay, like here, and here's the thing: what BLM should have done was people should have done more of them. This is again, I'm falling to the same problem where I try to collectivize everybody. Mm-hmm. What more individuals should have done was condemn those people. Oftentimes they got defensive and they'd say, well, that stupid line, hurt people. Okay, so we just don't convict rapists ever again because they got hurt when they were younger. Like, shut up. That is not an excuse to do evil to somebody or to destroy someone's livelihood. Like, you should have been much more cavalier and say like, hey, and you don't even need to do it all the time, but just say like, hey, I'm going to say this once. If you hurt somebody or destroy their business, livelihood, whatever, you are not part of this. I'm not even asking you to do it every day because the anti-media is going to find something every day, that you can do, to say, I'm going to dismiss you because I found one thing, it's not like you have to constantly be on like the defense of like feminism just because like some feminist said men should be raised and harvested for sperm. You can condemn that whole philosophy once, and then every time it comes up, at least people know where you stand. But, and then the same goes for the right wing. When they weren't saying that when they found out that they weren't Antifa protesters in disguise during the Capitol riots, they were so defensive about what they did to just, try and say, hey, like, okay, like maybe they didn't do the perfect thing, but they were doing something. And it's like, dude, just throw that, like cut them off. What does Christ say? Like when the hand is bad, it's better to cut off the hand than let the whole of it rot. Like, yes, like that, if that is any semblance, you don't need that hand anymore. Like if those people destroying businesses or raiding Capitol buildings, or if that is part, like cut that off. If you feel like you've had to be defensive of them, I think let it go.
Well, the problem with that is if the right wing were to completely condemn all of the awful, hateful, violent racists, then nobody else would be there to vote for them.
Well, there's a lot of group identity in that statement, but I'm not going to touch it. I like that. I like that you said that, though, Hodey. That it's a defensive-ness, and I think that it stems a lot from. People feel like they have to be defensive now because they have to automatically react defensive because look at the. Let's take a step back and look at the amount of attacks that Donald Trump took as president. Like he took a lot of attacks, some justified, sure, but more than anyone else has ever taken. He took a beating. from people, from the media, from his own party, from the other party. He took a beating. And so did his supporters. They got called names by the person that was running against them. They weren't like, so then you're like, well, if the other person wins, I'm not even going to be accepted in this country. I'm a degenerate, so like you just automatically, like, I can see how people on the right that fall under that would become defensive and automatically react to, I need to defend myself because it's going to come, the heat's going to come, and all my friends and family are going to tell me I'm crazy and I have to defend my ways. So that's just like, I can see that. That's like where it comes from. That we're describing the problem we're talking about. That's where I see it coming from. What do you guys think?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but then at the same time, I can understand why someone that, like, on the left would look at Trump saying, grab him by the genitals, and then not understand at all why people on the right, women on the right, would still be willing to vote for that person. So that is kind of deplorable that you would hear someone say something about your specific demographic.
I mean, are you? I was waiting for you to finish.
I mean, I'll let you interject.
I don't. I mean, there are many reasons to vote for someone, and that's not enough for me to. When you get two choices for president, that is not enough to change your opinion of someone. War is the number one issue for me. If you are anti-war, you're going to earn my vote, period, no matter what party you're in. There are other things that can take that vote away, but that is very important to me. So other things, I am never going to get my ideology elected. My ideology is not popular enough. I will never have 51% vote for my candidate, my Justin Amash, my perfect candidate, right? My Ron Paul, my perfect candidate. It's never going to happen. So I am always voting. I am always either going to vote for principles like I normally do, or for someone that's going to, in some cases, like in local races where I only get two choices and it's a Republican or a Democrat, I'm going to vote for the one that it has the best on my top issues. And they might be for Medicare for all, but might be my only choice for Congress, right? And maybe like Tulsi Gabbard, she's great. She's anti-war, but she's for Medicare for all. So, like, she's obviously not my candidate, but I'm going to vote for her over the other choice, because it doesn't matter if Tulsi Gabbard says something important that, like, well, she's not going to do that because she's a great person. She's just not going to say anything that would ever be like that. But, like, it's a non-political issue, and it shouldn't pull you away from voting on your principles on advancing the country. You know what I mean? Like, if he says something that's that bad, you elect him and then you impeach him and then you get the vice president as the president. Like, that's how it should happen.
Wow. So what you're saying is that if I personally feel that the conservative candidate is more likely to vote in ways that I see as, like, good for me and good for the country, that I should ignore their history, like admitted out loud history of sexual harassment. Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
I don't think what he said was sexual harassment.
Let me ask.
Grab him by the pussy.
Yes, in a locker room with a bunch of dudes was not sexual harassment.
They said he did.
Let him. When you're rich, you can do what you want.
Whatever.
You can kiss him. You can grab him by the pussy. That's what I do. I grab him by the pussy.
All right. Now hold on, Aaron, because I do have a question for you here. Then how many black people do you think should have voted for Joe Biden based on his record, the record of Kamala Harris, and the things that he said about black people? Then
I have not one time defended anything that Biden said or Kamala said. I think they're both just as bad.
My apologies for the mispronunciation. I know some people do that to, like, be racist, but I did that on it. It's Kamala. Yeah.
No, I think that Kamala is awful, and she's lied to get herself in the position that she's in, and she's done terrible things, and no self-respecting. Like I feel like if you care about those issues, those social issues that affect Black people, you should never have given your vote to her, because she's the one responsible for perpetuating those things, putting those Black people in jail for small amounts of weed. Like,
Sure.
that's her job.
But that's like policy. What we're talking about with Trump, like what Chris is saying, there's like locker room talk, you know what I mean? Which is just being dirty. Even if we just take what Joe Biden has said and not taken what he's done, you would still say like that's bad enough that you shouldn't have voted for Biden.
Yeah. If it were me and I were Black and I've got Black kids, and the candidate that I'm considering voting for, I find out that he said that I wouldn't want my kids in that jungle.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know why you have to be Black to feel that way. I feel that way already.
Well, that was the example.
Oh, okay.
He asked me if I were a person of color. That was the example.
Well, that's just what I'm saying. I don't have to feel that. I feel that way already. I wouldn't have voted for him for that reason anyway.
I agree. And I think the end of Trump's running should have been when he was up there mocking a physically disabled person. That should have been the end of that. But,
yeah. It's I mean, some would call it respectability politics. Some would just call it being a good person.
But look at who he was running against. She was also breaking the law and saying just as abhorrent things. So that's what I was saying was you have to look past that stuff and vote on the issues when you have only two people that are that bad. But that's also why Gary Johnson got more votes than he ever did, because 5 million people did vote, because they voted against both of them probably because of their values and because they were not likable people. and I mean, that really showed. It came through in the numbers for Gary.
Well, let's go to the last segment we got here, guys. It's called Piece of My Mind. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. I will start. I wanted to talk about Rush Limbaugh for a second. He passed away this last week, died of lung cancer. Terrible disease. Feel bad for him in regards to the death. But here's the thing about Rush Limbaugh. If you love Rush Limbaugh, I totally understand why you love Rush Limbaugh. Like he was funny. He was always quick with a good. Obviously, not all of his humor was appropriate or good, but when he was funny, he was funny. He was at least attempt to make it humorous. I think. Chris Spangle talked about this a little bit, in that like Ben Shapiro is good at making people angry at the other side. Rush Limbaugh wanted to make you laugh at the other side. He existed to mock the left. I was raised, I think for me, I wasn't raised hearing Rush Limbaugh, right? But I discovered him on my way to work, and would listen to him during my lunch breaks. When it's high noon, it's Rush Limbaugh, is what we had in Colorado. And so, I'd listened to him, and it was like, oh my gosh. It was the first time for me that I'd realized that there was widespread lying in politicians. Now, some people that are raised libertarians, that's not the norm. You are raised believing kind of your politicians. Like, hey, if it's on the internet, it's probably true. I know that there are lies on the internet, but I'm sure they're rare or they're whatever. Rush Limbaugh was the first person to open my eyes that was like, no, not only is there lying, it's rampant. And it's in your face, and there's not even an attempt to reconcile it, And so for me, I think that was my gratitude to Rush Limbaugh. I later would come to realize what a filthy human being he was, the terrible things he said about people. And I realized that me saying like, well, I just remember the good things is kind of telling my friends that remember the bad things that they don't matter, right? Like if you're a person who died of AIDS and he played disco music and like was celebrating around while reading your name because you died of AIDS, my friends aren't going to hear like, I remember the good things about Rush Limbaugh and think that what I'm telling them is that they matter, right? Or that like, hey, like that evil is so bad, it kind of undoes all that good thing about all the good stuff about telling me like, hey, this is what government does. So I think when you praise or criticize Rush Limbaugh, I think you have to be very specific, because I just think if you say like, man, what a great human being, look, he did some great things as a human being. He was he was a great neighbor. He had a studio that was actually like diversified. He made a point to like include, he engaged in dialogue. There are certain things you can point to that make Rush a good human being. That does not negate the bad things that he did or his net weight to those, and the bad doesn't outweigh the good either. When we talk about people, I mean, I'm glad we've already talked about individualism a little bit. You can't boil them all down to one thing. I'm sure that any of us had posted something on social media where we're like, that didn't age well, I shouldn't have said that, or like, we change, we evolve as people. Rush did not change quite enough as far as evolving as a person. But, I think at one point that you look back and you say like, hey, look, Rush, thanks for the good memories. Screw you for the bad memories. And it really made it hard for people to feel welcome in this country and feel welcome as a human being. If I know that you've kind of celebrated my father's death because my father died of AIDS, then none of the good stuff really matters. Like, that is just so egregious. Had Rush maybe had some contrition later in life, about saying like, hey, I know I did all these things, they were bad, as opposed to just like, hey, I'm going to pretend the AIDS thing didn't happen anymore, things might have been different. I think I probably would have been much more forgiving and much more understanding. I think every one of us has probably had some belief that we grow up and realize is like not just bad, but reprehensible. He didn't really have that realization. He was a great broadcaster. He was talented. I understand the contributions he made towards news media, but I think if you see somebody who's celebrating Rush Limbaugh, I would ask them to be specific. And I think if you see somebody that is spitting on his grave, I would ask them to be specific. And I would understand. I think somebody can harbor these strong feelings because Rush was not somebody who left. He did not leave you a lot of wiggle room to love, to be lukewarm on him. Half the time you listen to him, you're like, this is funny, this is the best thing ever. Half time you listen to him, you're like, this is sick, this is depraved. This is the reason we can't have discussions like normal people anymore. I don't know, I just had a lot of mixed feelings with it because I think when he passed, I had progressed so much past Rush Limbaugh, but I still I think when somebody dies, you naturally remember, if there are any good times, you try to think of those. And so for me, I naturally was like, dang, that's kind of what made me realize that politicians were skeevy liars, was Rush Limbaugh. And then I realized he was a skeevy liar. And I grew from there, and I way grew past, Rush Limbaugh. But I guess for me, I recognize where he got me. I'm grateful for that. I am very disappointed, and I shouldn't even say disappointed. It's outrageous, the things that he said. I have people that I love as human beings that he made fun of, that he despised, that he made this country inhospitable for, that he poisoned people's minds against them. And I understand if you can't forgive him, I'm not sure if I can forgive him either for those things, but thank goodness God's in charge of all of that. Chris, thoughts on Rush Limbaugh?
I can empathize with that a lot, with your position about the way you feel about him. I had a similar experience with Glenn Beck early, like back before the Tea Party movement. I kind of he opened my eyes to a lot of the things wrong with a lot of systems and a lot of government, the way government was set up and the way it was functioning. And I definitely grew way past Glenn Beck. I understand how you feel about him. I never felt that way about Rush Limbaugh. How old are you, Hodey? If you don't
30. I am 36.
Okay. I'm 30. I never really had a radio age. I don't know why I never really listened to talk radio until I got older. And then, by then I was already past Glenn Beck, right? So I was obviously past Rush Limbaugh. But yes, I mean, so from what I know about him is only the things you read. So it's only negative things. That's, pretty much all I've read about him. I understand he's basically a pioneer in talk radio and the media itself too, right? So, he obviously had a massive audience. You could say the same thing about someone like Alex Jones, though, and it doesn't make him a legend. So I think that he's on another level compared to that. So it wasn't just his audience. He impacted a lot of people in both positive and negative ways. And I think that is the one thing that I took from his passing, is that there aren't very many people without a very strong opinion about him. It reminded me of Trump. If Trump died tomorrow, there is very few people that would not have a very strong opinion about whether they were happy or sad about it. So that's how I feel about it. I'm kind of disconnected from it, though. I know Aaron's a little bit more, has a little bit stronger feelings than I do.
Yeah, Aaron, let's hear all the nice things you have to say about Rush Limbaugh. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if I can come up with any nice things. Okay, I would say probably the nicest thing I could say about him is I honestly, truly hope for his soul's sake that the hate that he spouted was not actually how he felt, and it was all over that $40 million they were paying him. Because I'm pretty sure I would say some crazy shit if you were giving me $40 million a year. Might be willing to say some crazy stuff that I might not necessarily believe.
How very capitalist of you, Aaron.
Yeah, I was about to say, crazy capitalist you. Jeez.
So I clearly, a lot of the things he said were absolutely hateful, disgusting things, and I can't say that I can think of too many nice things to say about the man other than good riddance. I'm glad I don't have to hear him speak anymore. Like, one of the people that I've done a lot of work for in their home is a Catholic family, very conservative. They've got 12 children, and Rush Limbaugh was playing on the radio pretty regularly in their home, and I would have been less surprised if they let their Catholic children watch pornography throughout the day than to hear those innocent, sweet children being fed that hate. And that's all I got to say.
That's fair.
Wow.
Aaron, give us a piece of your mind.
All right. So the thing that I wanted to kind of touch on was capitalism, and you know, Chris and I have had plenty of discussions on that, and specifically I wanted to talk about Texas and, you know, the things that are going on down there. I'm a contractor, and my dad and I were talking about, you know, taking a trip down there. We had talked about that. You got a whole lot of people down there that are hurting real bad, and a lot of it is because, you know, Texas chose to have their own power grid to stave the regulation and to keep out of the foot of the Fed. And you've got a whole lot of companies that can't keep stuff going right now, and you got people that are hurting real bad, and they're begging for the socialism at this point. They're begging for the government aid. And I think that it's a really good example that shows the greed that shows the bad side of capitalism. Yeah, capitalism makes my life a whole lot easier. It makes my life a whole lot more comfortable. But there are bad parts. There are bad sides to that. And if you don't regulate things, these are the kind of things that can happen, where you have a whole lot of people without power and a whole lot of people that can't feed their children because they chose to go with the free market, and now the free market is screwing them over. It's all about the profits. These companies are making record profits in this last week. They're making more money than they would have made all year, so they're not hurting. They clearly don't have to choose. They don't have to charge 180 times the normal rate for that power, or they wouldn't be making record profits at this point. I think what they're doing is immoral, and it should be illegal. I don't think that they should be allowed to do that, and across most of the country agrees, because that is the regulation. You can't take advantage of those people when they're down and out, and you've got people that are getting $20,000 light bills, and that's abhorrent. It's ridiculous, and the regulations were there, the regulations they wanted them to follow were there to save them from this exact problem. And had they followed federal guidelines, federal regulations, their stuff would have been built up to snuff, and they wouldn't have had this problem, because plenty of power companies all across the globe deal with cold weather all the time. They just weren't ready for it in Texas because they didn't have to be. They didn't have to be. And now the people are paying for it, not the company, the people.
Right. Would you say, just as my rebuttal to this would be, do you believe that Texas energy is a free market system?
That is their goal. They're much more closer to a free market system than IPL is.
Okay.
Indy Power and Lights.
Yeah. Because they do exist on a monopoly that is it's not federally mandated, but it is mandated by the state, and it is still a monopoly. And I think for me, that is my big issue, is if you as soon as you don't have to compete for people's service, you get Texas. You know what I mean? And that's why I am probably still a capitalist, because I see the elimination of this competition. I'm not saying you're wrong either in your observations, because you're right. They are begging to be on the rest of the country's grid as they cycle through. And the thing is even if as individualists, we are going to collectivize a little bit. Not everybody is going to have their own thorium reactor in their home. Right. So there are things that are going to be shared, but the way Texas do it they did it about as anti-free market as possible. I mean, we have this issue a lot as libertarians when we talk about schools, right? They're all local. They got these local issues and local problems. It's not, there is a Department of Education that is super corrupt and evil, but a lot of the abuses that happen on this local level. It's I think the issue that I have is government in general. And I think a lot of people are blaming this on, oh, look at this free market thing they did. And I kind of look at it and I'm like, they didn't even get close to a free market, would be my response.
Gosh, Hodey, you made my job really easy on this one. Took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, our dream would be that there would have been 5 competing electric companies all vying for you, Aaron, to buy their services. Therefore, if one raised the price, you could just cancel your deal with them and go sign up for the competition. But unfortunately, we live in a world where government gives contracts and gives private chunks of market to companies so that they have no competition and they can operate freely without any outside influences. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem, the root of the problem. I think it's mistaken often to blame capitalism. I think it's a very often thing that I think it's a thing that happens very often, that capitalism gets blamed for something like healthcare. Healthcare is so broken, capitalism can't handle it. And I'm like, but healthcare is like the most regulated industry there is. Like it's as far from capitalism as there is in America in a market. So that's how it is. That's how I see it with the power as well. What do you think, Aaron?
So a big problem with the idea of there being 5 power companies or 5 water companies or 5 gas companies is it's nearly impossible to create the infrastructure for me to be able to switch using IPL and start using Duke, because now they have to put 28 million lines just to run to my house. That's cost prohibitive, and you don't actually end up with any kind of competition, because once those power lines are in there, they're in there, and they're not going to be able to just go in and turn a valve in the water line that says now you get your water from this company and not from that company. And you can't have literally power lines going to every single person's house that go to every single different company's grid. That's an impossibility. You can't. That doesn't work.
It's not impossible, but you're right. It doesn't happen today, and that I can understand where you would make this argument. But see, it's very easy to measure the negatives, like you said earlier. It's very easy to measure when bad things happen, like how many people were affected because capitalism, but it's also very hard to measure the good things that have happened because of said capitalism, because you just assume in your head that they would happen without it, right? And I was going somewhere with that. What was your question to me, Aaron?
Was it? Well, I'm not sure I asked the question. What I said was that you can't really have a free market with five different competitors to give you your power.
And that's what I was saying. By the bad, you can't measure. It's easier to measure the bad things. So, in a market where there's not been competition for decades, it's lacked innovation. Like if you think of probably the organization that has the oldest computers is probably the government, right? Companies upgrade their computers because they know they need the technology to further innovate and build new products and sell more services, but the government always lags behind. When there's no competition for a service, there's no innovation for that said market. So yes, there is no way to connect 5 electric companies to your house currently. But I argue that if there was competition in this market for the last 30 years, there may very well possibly be a node on your street that has multiple connections to it that your neighbors can then lobby or purchase, and then the companies decide based off how many subscribers they have on that road if they bring service to that node. It is not impossible to see a future where innovation fixes those problems because they would profit more, they would have more customers in more areas because they could compete, and they would want your business, so they would make it affordable for you to be able to switch because they would want you to be a customer and pay them.
I think Aaron's point is well taken, though, because I do think it is something that capitalists, we tend to be dismissive of these concerns. And it's like, listen, these are going to be growing pains if we get capitalism, right? If we get the free market, right? Like you're saying, like we have these great optimistic ideas. I think it's important not to paint it out as some kind of utopia. It's like to say like, hey, listen, freedom is freedom. You also have the freedom to make bad decisions and hurt yourself with freedom. You know what I mean? Like socialism sometimes saves people from making bad decisions and hurting themselves, and for better or for worse. And I think that, and so I understand like these kind of growing pains that would happen. I obviously I'm going to side probably more with Chris on this one. However, I think Aaron is not wrong in his observations, because I think it is something to say like, hey, listen, a lot of people say, I mean, how many times do people say like, okay, well, let's just get rid of the federal level, and if it's at the state level, it'll be so much better. Well, this is kind of the comeuppance of that, right? Like this is in energy. They cut themselves off from, the federal grid, and now they're on their own grid, and this is the grid, like, did the state do it better than the federal government? Obviously in this situation, no, they didn't.
The government always fails. So the reason that I am for a more state level government over a federal government, because if government always fails and you only have one government, then everyone fails. If you have 50 governments, there's a chance, although albeit slight, that some governments may succeed or create better solutions, at least compared to their competing governments. Like Texas may have fallen, but it is much better than the entire country have fallen right now, correct? So that's where I look at, there are negatives. There may be a loser, yes, but there are many more winners because of that way that it's set up, and that competition even between states is kind of like the free market, and it breeds better government because Indiana wants to do better than its neighbors, right? So that's how we get better government. There's no competition with the federal government besides them hating each other. So there's no growth and innovation in the way governments ran because there's no competition. That's why I like state government better.
I think there's 195 sovereign nations, and every single one ended up adopting the Nazis' economic model. Like every single one ended up doing it. And it's like, unfortunately, I want to believe that there'd be more competition if we just broke it down and made it all like local, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I would invite the experiment. Obviously, I would probably still prefer a lot of counties instead of one big, massive sovereign government, especially with the stuff America's doing around the world, as you noted, Chris. At least it would maybe at least it would disjoin our efforts to like blow up other countries. But as far as that solving all the problems,
I like it because then if one state is a bad actor, you have 49 checks on it, and it's a lot better than you have one federal government bad actor and the only other check is itself, another branch of itself.
We have 195 checks on America right now.
Yeah. Can any of them really check America right now, or do we run free and roam the land and police the world like we want because no one checks us? That. I want to decentralize our power so that way people can check us. Like the UK could check California, like they could check Texas if Texas was acting bad, but they can't check the United States.
Aaron, since this
it's risky, at least.
Sure. If this is a piece of your mind, I'll let you get the final say on it, and then we'll turn it over to Chris's thing.
All right. So I can completely see where you're coming from on is this a free market argument? But that doesn't change whether or not this was about deregulation. And one of the things, clearly he hasn't said it today, but one of the things that Chris has said to me is regulations always hurt. They always hurt the people and they only help the corporations. And this was about deregulation, and it absolutely hurt the people and it absolutely helped the corporations because they didn't have to pay the money to put in the equipment needed to keep the gas lines going under freezing temperatures like they would have had they been regulated by the federal government like all of the rest of the power companies in the country. And no, it's not a free market, but neither is anything else at all. Period.
That's true.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll give you a piece of my mind then. It leads right into my piece of my mind because there are free markets. Absolutely. But that's not my peace of mind. So I really just want to know both of you. I want to start with Hodey. Hodey, what's your favorite pizza? Because I've been dieting and I am craving pizza and I can't eat it. And I want to know, what's your favorite pizza?
We have a local place here called The Pie, and it is stacked with cheese. Like monstrous amounts of cheese, like so much so that like sometimes they get complaints that people put too much cheese on the pizza. And I am a cheese nut. I am insane about cheese. I could talk about it. I could talk about every different kind of cheese. And so for me, the pie, it hits all the right vibes with me. I mean, the crust is still good. I hate a sweet sauce. For me, a tomato is sweet enough that as soon as you add sugar, you messed it up. So for me, it's a nice, I like spicy sauce. I can handle some of that, but they don't sweeten their sauce up, and I just love a nice mild pizza sauce. And so for me, that's it. Now, as far as like nationally goes, because I'm not sure that can help you at all, I think Papa John's is probably still doing the best nationally, although the others are keeping up, and I think that's good to have some competition. But yeah, are you just asking me to like describe like what I have on it, or like are you looking for?
Oh yeah, if you want to, I would love to hear your favorite toppings too.
Man, so like I am pretty much a cheese purist. Although if you have a nice ground sausage, oh my gosh, I really love ground sausage
under the cheese.
Yeah, under the cheese. You can even put some on top of the cheese too. Red pepper flakes. I mean, if I'm in heaven and I'm making and I'm having angels make my pizza, let's stuff the crust on that pizza too. Let's find a way for me to get more cheese in there somehow. I love it when the edge of the pizza is kind of like garlic bread, like they've brushed it with butter and they put some garlic and herbs on there too. Because then you're like, all right, it's different than a pizza, but still Italian, still tasting good. And that way you look forward to your crust.
Wow.
I'm definitely I am definitely a deep dish guy, so long as it's not deep with sauce. I think I hate to be too negative on sauce again, but I think sometimes you put like, they're like, look at this deep dish pizza, and it's like a soup with like tomato sauce, and I'm like, that's not. Come on now, like if it's
are those shots at Giordano's? It has a lot of cheese, but it has a lot of sauce too.
Yeah, I can tolerate it as long as you got the cheese to make up for it. But yeah, DiGiorno's is all right with me. I am probably one of those that falls into the sex is like pizza. When it's good, it's great, and when it's bad, it's still pretty good. I think for me, all pizza is still pretty good. So the judgments that I've made have been me being picky, but I would probably eat even a poorly made pizza. I would still probably enjoy. How about you, Aaron?
I would say locally, Mars Hill Monster. Chris knows what I'm talking about. That's everything on top of everything kind of pizza. No mushrooms, no black olives.
Oh,
everything else is fine.
Yep.
And nationally, I prefer Domino's. I like their pan pizza. Kind of the opposite of what you said. Like, I don't like that much cheese. I can't do stuffed crust. Like, I prefer sauce over cheese all day, every day. I like a nice, airy, like fat bread.
All right. Two opposing pizza choices. Chris, where do you land?
I love pizza. It doesn't even matter. Like, if you say I want pizza, you want pizza, and they say what toppings, I'm like, whatever you want to throw on there, I'll eat it. I like you said, mushrooms and black olives. Black olives are all right. Like, whatever, I don't eat them, but mushrooms are great. But I definitely will eat any. Well, there is one exception. Pineapples do not go on pizza. Do not go on pizza. I love pineapples, but I don't like warm pineapples on my tomato sauce with cheese. Like, that's weird. So, like, that's the only exception. I'll eat any other kind of pizza, but not pineapples. Everything else is cool.
Even on the Marshall Monster?
Well, no, yeah, I don't really like it on there either, but I still eat it, whatever. So, like, I even think, Aaron, didn't you even work at a pizza place once?
I did. I worked at Domino's for a little while.
Yeah. So did you know that Domino's has, like, how do they do their cheese? Like, they have big blocks of cheese, and then they just put it in a machine, and it shreds it all, right?
No, it definitely comes pre-shredded in a bag.
Huh.
And there's like 4 bags in a box, and you cut them open and pour the cheese into a bin, and then you sprinkle it on the pizza.
Oh, interesting.
All this cheese talk, I'm gonna have to go. I'm getting,
I know you love cheese. I mean, I just wanted to really thank capitalism for how good pizza tastes, and that it's easy to get straight to your door. And because of the free market, there's so much competition, and that we can all like totally different pizzas, and it's all acceptable because you like pizza. Nobody said they didn't like pizza, and that would have been the wrong answer. The correct answer was whatever kind of pizza you like, but capitalism gives you that choice, and it's a beautiful thing, and we should not want to destroy that. Even think about like the innovations that have been made in pizza, like the pizza box itself, and how if there's too much moisture in the box, it makes a soggy pizza by the time it gets to your house. But if it doesn't keep the pizza, like if it keeps it too warm and the steam like makes your pizza all soggy, you open it up, you're like, that's disgusting, but it also, in the same sense, like, it has to keep it warm enough. You don't want a cold pizza. Like, and then you want it cut all the way, so they got to get those sharp cutters, and then they're cutting hundreds of pizzas a day, so you got to like get sharp. And like, there's so much innovation they don't even think about, that capitalism gets no credit for, that you consume every week or every month, all of the time. Pizza, even frozen pizza. Even frozen pizza is innovative. Think about the way they have to make the crust specially to make sure there's air in it, so that way when it's frozen and when it's made and then unfrozen on its way to a grocery store, and then frozen again, and then unfrozen on the way to your house, and then frozen again, and then finally cooked, and it still has to like look good and taste good. That took a lot of R&D and a lot of money, and they budgeted that in to still be able to sell you a Tombstone pizza for $3.99, and you can get 3 for $10. Like, isn't that a beautiful thing?
Aaron, I feel like this is barely veiled criticism of your economic school of thought. So I'll let you respond first.
Well, as long as the slaves across the world aren't responsible for making sure that my pizza is only $3.99, then I'll agree with you that capitalism is fantastic.
Woo! Oh, Chris, you won. You won the podcast. We can hang it up now. No, I'm with you. So I love economic literature. I think a lot of what I get from the definite, because everybody defines capitalism and socialism differently. I feel like whenever you talk about it, you have to ask, hey, first of all, what do you mean when you say capitalism and socialism, even before you get into the conversation? It's just, for me, like, I don't think the conversation can progress when you're just talking in those generalities, because people don't have the same definitions. I think for me, I deal with a lot of like origin stories. I've read I love Adam Smith, and I read a lot of the history. One of the things that I was reading was, and this is a tidbit you might not know about, but it's a fun one. The USSR actually made more food than America did, even at the height of the starvation, the Cold Wars. It's just they didn't have the incentive to give it out, and so a lot of it rotted in the mills, and that's why people died, as it went stale and stagnant. And the thing is I think that I do think when you read something like The Conquest of Bread, I do think there's a compelling point to be made to say, hey, that's cute. Like, you're rubbing our luxuries in your face, but if you have like homeless people dying, that kind of negates anything that I care about. Like the fact that you got like, ooh, look at this little topping I got on my pizza, when there's somebody like starving to death in the streets. That being said, I probably am with you, Chris, in that I don't see a way of structuring your economy in a way that incentivizes people to actually give out the food that, like, not only is it not good, like, as you mentioned, Chris, what they were giving out was bread, right? Is bread lines. I mean, this is, it's not great food that you were getting, and I would be okay with that if they were meeting their quota of feeding every single person in their country, because I'd be like, hey, you know what? As much as I like cheese, I understand that keeping everybody alive and making sure their needs are met is more important. However, the problem that you get with some of those, I mean, you look at what they were eating in Venezuela, and the fact that they ran out of food is embarrassing, because it was basically, it's not called a potato. It's called like a yuca or something. But essentially they were feeding their people potatoes, and then they ran out of the incentive to keep feeding people potatoes, and now people are trying to catch cats and eat that way. And so I think the issue that I see Chris making this inference, and I think he's correct, that it is hard for me to imagine what a structured economy looks like that actually meets everybody's needs and then keeps meeting their needs and has the incentive to do so. And I think for me, not only does capitalism does, at least if we let's just call the current situation capitalism, if you will, it is embarrassing to me that we live in a nation that we have people that starve to death when we throw away so much food. And I do see that as like luxurious. Do I get with the socialists? Like, do they have a point when they say like, hey, look, you might have 1 million different kinds of pizza and you had 80 different people starve to death in your country last month. What is going on over there? I'm like, yeah, that's tough to answer for, like that is something you got to answer for. However, I don't see a way of kind of covering that problem with a state-run system.
I'm not an advocate for a state-run system. I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist. My goal here is merely to point out that there are shortcomings to capitalism. That's it.
Okay.
That's it. I'm not saying I'm that capitalism is the.
You're not pro anything. You're not bringing any solutions to the table.
I'm sure he's got something.
Is that what I said? I didn't say I was anti-capitalist.
Oh, okay.
No, that's just what you take from what I say, not what I actually say. I'm not an anti-capitalist. My goal is to point out that there are shortcomings, there are bad parts, and there are things that we could address. It's not the golden pedestal that we, this is the best that humanity can ever freaking do. I'm saying it's not that. It's not.
I said that. It's the best we've ever done, but it is not the best we could ever do.
Right. Otherwise, we'd be on the USS Enterprise right now.
I advocate for an entirely different system of government, or at least a very limited, very different from what we have today, right? A very much more limited system than we have today. It wouldn't even be recognizable, compared to what we have today, because people may not even go vote because it has such little impact on your life. That's what I would want.
Interesting. I think
you give all the power to the corporations that are already trying to fuck us over.
Okay.
That's their goal. That's their job, is to get as much money out of us as they can.
So you're a statist.
Did I say that?
I'm trying to identify your view then. If you're saying limited government means more power to the corporations, then what do you want? You're just being anti-everything and offering nothing positive in return. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to get you to say what you are, not say what you are not.
It's hard for me to put myself in a box. I hardly even call myself a libertarian, because clearly there are bad sides to all of the situations. I'm just here to point out that there are bad sides to capitalism, and it's not the greatest thing that's ever happened to the entire world, because there are a lot of people that still suffer. And
well, in 1970, the poverty, the people living on less than $1 a day was 27% in the world, and today it's 6%. So, or even lower, maybe 4%. So
right.
there are
more slaves today than there ever have been in history.
Wage slaves. You know what?
No slaves. Actual slaves. Actual slaves. There are more slaves today
than
there ever have been.
For real. I tell you what, I would have to look that up. By the way, I did look up the Clinton scandal. The Clinton scandal was whitewater, by the way. I had the wrong water in my head. Watergate, Whitewater, they all sound the same. Guys, we're going to have a lot of debates about this.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So this is fun, and it's productive.
I wanted to talk about pizza a little bit and lighten it up, because we were talking about some serious issues for a while. So
sure. Well, and you turned it around, then made it about economy, which is good. I think it's good to have a discussion about. I think certainly we will be talking about economics a lot, because I think probably all of us are going to be against the drug war and certain things like that. So obviously when we talk about debate, we talk about our differences, but this is hopefully the first of many conversations. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Hodey Johns, Aaron V, Chris Gault, we love you all to death. And
thanks,
please tell everybody you love the show, share it around. If we get a lot of engagement, then you'll hear a show number 2 from us. And if not, then the market will provide you with nothing. So yes. we are not corporate. We're hanging on by a thread here, guys. Anyhow, thank you so much. And we will see you all next time.